talking with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and today's guest is somebody who I didn't know her name for a very long time. However, she has been diving really deep into just the inserts, and that happens to be also what her Instagram and website are called. Her name is Alexandra, however, and I'm very pleased to have her as a guest on the show. Welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the birth of Just the Inserts. How did it come about?
That's a great question. Someone just recently surmised it as the cry of a mother, and that's so true. My oldest daughter was injured by the synthetic vitamin K injection, and I was just forced to really research the products that had been recommended to me during my birth, my labor and delivery, and then postpartum, and how that showed up in the reality of being a first time mom, having a jaundice, having a colic child, not knowing what to do, being gaslit by pediatricians, being fired by pediatricians, trying to find just a medical professional that would listen to my concerns and wouldn't just say, oh, that's just crying, babies cry. And I was a nanny in college. I've been babysitting since I was 13. I know normal crying, I know hungry crying, and I know pain crying. And my daughter had pain crying. And so I was just searching for answers. And in parallel to that happening, before I gave birth to her, I had been handed a one-page sheet on the Tdap vaccine. And I had asked my own mother to research it for me. I was just mentally exhausted from researching everything else that a new mom has to research. And she researched it for me. And she was just very aggressive in what she had found. And I even remember saying to her, you sound like a crazy anti-vaxxer. Like it just sounded crazy to me. How could vaccines be tied to SIDS? That's bonkers. We all know that it's the plushie that you have in the bassinet, or, putting the baby face down. So there were things happening in parallel to my own journey as a mom dealing with a pharmaceutically injured child, and then also my own mom trying to share research with me, and me pushing back on her because I felt that it was very polarizing and very fear-based, the way that she was presenting the information to me. And so then I just went to the inserts. I didn't know what they were. I knew that there had to be some kind of government document. For all products on the market have some kind of government document associated with it. At least most of them do, and especially something as serious as a medical product. And so I found them, and I started realizing my preconceived notions about the vaccine industry and the pharmaceutical industry as a whole were completely wrong. And I was very emotionally defending something that I really didn't know a lot about. So because of that, I started sharing my research. I just couldn't keep it inside. Once you research something like that, you just want to tell everyone you know, sing it from a mountaintop. And I was doing it on my personal Instagram, and that didn't go so well. I got shadow banned, and I lost a lot of friends. I probably only have one or two friends from that time in my life from before then. And then I just was praying, and I was just asking for guidance from God on what to do next. And I knew that I needed to do something. I just didn't know what. And then I slowly started getting inspiration to create an account for Just the Inserts. So I started it, and it blew up. I got 10,000 followers within a week. It ended up growing to about 148,000 followers. And then I was deleted a week before the federal mandate for the COVID vaccine. And I was not allowed to come back on Instagram for about 8 months. I kept trying to get on. I was on a secret Telegram group with a whole bunch of other people that had gotten deleted with me. And we were all trying to figure out, okay, one was having people from all over the world trying to create accounts for him so he could log on. And then I think he went through like 20 different accounts. And I just didn't want to do that. I was pregnant with my second child by that point. And so I just took the break, and I worked on my website and tried to create that resource library for my website. And then when Elon Musk bought Twitter, now X, that same day, for some reason, I was allowed to join Instagram again under my original username, just the inserts. All my content had been wiped, so I had to restart that. But now I'm close to 200,000 now, which to me, it's never been about numbers, but it's just really amazing to me that other people feel the same way I do. And we just want to know what manufacturers say about their products. We just want to make informed decisions. And so that's why I'm here. And I've been anonymous this entire time just to protect my family and protect just my own mental health too. When you put your face out there, and I'm sure you know this too, that opens you up for a lot of personal attacks. And thankfully, I haven't had too much of it since I've shown my face now. But I just realized I needed to speak more openly about this. I can't hide behind a logo anymore. And then with RFK Jr. coming out and having such an important role now with HHS and so many other really incredible people speaking out more and more, it was encouraging to me. So that's why I'm excited to be here and talk more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think RFK has really given us a stronger voice, not only in politics, but in general, societally. We talked about this a little bit before, but, I'm a Gen X mom and you're a millennial mom. And I think the Gen X moms got really tired of trying to tell these stories over and over and over again. And there is kind of a proverbial passing of the torch now to the millennial moms, but a lot of the Gen X moms ended up going silent because they were fearful, because they had been censored, because they'd been kicked off all the social media channels, all of those things. Um, and then their kids are grown and you get to the point then, okay, why am I even speaking out? I do think, obviously the COVID years made people much more vocal in general because they realized the importance of speaking up and speaking out. So when you were going through just the inserts, what was the most shocking revelation for you?
Oh man. Well, to first, I just wanted to say when you were speaking about Gen X moms, it's almost like psychological warfare
Right.
going through all of this. So I bravo to you for sticking through it and for everyone else that has been talking about this for decades. I appreciate everything that you've done to lay the groundwork. So then those of us could come up behind and take up that torch and help and link arms. And one thing that is so encouraging to me is that there is there's no unifying factor that I found for the people in this movement other than the fact that we just love our children. We love our children. We love our community so much. We don't all look the same. We don't all talk the same. We don't all have the same backgrounds. We come from different educational backgrounds as well. And so for me, it's just really encouraging that the people that have been it for so long are still here and still guiding us along the way. So I just wanted to address that before we move on. But the biggest thing for me when I first started reading the inserts, there were two pivotal points. The first one was I was reading the manufacturer inserts for DTaP. And those are given to 2, 4, 6 month old babies, which according to the NIH is the highest rate of SIDS for babies. And of course, being a new mom, everybody's worried about SIDS. You're always concerned about that. And, you get a fan in your room to make sure that the air is circulating, and you get the bassinet to make sure that it's not too squishy and not too hard. And it's just you're hyper aware of it as a new mom. And I remember reading one of the manufacturer inserts for DTaP, and I scrolled down to the post-marketing adverse reactions section, and I saw sudden infant death syndrome listed as a known potential adverse reaction to the DTaP vaccine. And the DTaP vaccine, according to the CDC schedule, is administered to 2, 4, 6 month old babies. And that was just mind blowing to me that here the FDA has this on their website. The manufacturer knows, the government knows, but none of the parents know. I was never warned this. I mean, I had already been researching vaccines, and thankfully none of my children have received them. But still, couldn't believe it. I had friends that had accepted it because they were worried about their child developing whooping cough and pertussis, or whooping cough being pertussis. So to me, it was just mind-boggling that it wasn't front page news. How is there no Aaron Brockovich or some journalist taking this on and making it more mainstream? It was very shocking to me. And then the second one was when I started reading about the polio vaccine, the history of the polio vaccine. Now, I will say, when I first started researching it, or researching pharmaceuticals and vaccines in general, I didn't want to read any books. I wanted everything that I read to be from .gov resources. So I know there's amazing books out there, and I have them, a lot of them, in my resources tab on my website, but I didn't read any of those up front because I wanted everything that I said to be supported by a .gov research or resource. And so when I was reading through those .gov resources, and they were talking about the Cutter incident, and they were talking about oral polio vaccine and how that first came out and how people were dying from it, and then there were pediatricians that flat out refused to continue administering that product, to me, it was shocking. I was never taught that. I had no idea that that was the history of America. And here it's sitting on a .gov resource. That to me was just mind blowing. And so it just opened up the door for me to start questioning everything. And I started researching mid 2019. So I was pre-COVID when I started researching everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then to live through COVID and to live through how cases were tracked, and to get messages from nurses and people in the medical community raising red flags, and then them being fired for having concerns, that to me just proved everything that I knew beforehand wasn't actually the truth. And that history can easily be rewritten by culture and how they perceive it that actually happened. And even now, before we jumped on, I got a heated message from someone. I was talking about MMR and how there's the potential to shed the live vaccine strain from MMR, and she just went off on me saying that that's an impossibility, there's no way. Yet the CDC and FDA speak at length about shedding, and that it's a scientific fact.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you brought up polio, and particularly, my parents' generation was really focused on polio, and that was always the argument. When I spoke about vaccines, and my first coming out, if you will, as an anti-vaxxer, had to do with polio. I was a member of the Rotary Club, and Rotary Club has polio as one of their missions. Eradicating polio is very near and dear to the Rotary Club in general. And so what they do is they send various members abroad over typically to Africa, and they are administering oral polio vaccine. And I had already done some research. I knew that oral polio vaccine had been at that point terminated in the United States. However, they're going over into Africa and administering oral polio vaccine, sometimes multiple times, to these kids who just want the candy that they give them. And, having no medical background, these are just, Rotary Club members administering vaccines to these kids. And then there's no accountability or follow-up. And of course, as I'm sure you're well aware, and many of our listeners are, seasoned in a lot of this information, but the oral polio vaccine was banned in the United States because it was known to cause polio. So, a lot of, it's very, very interesting, I think, as you start to really unravel, what is particularly just in the inserts, for example, and how that relates historically. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, when you were reading through all of these, do you ever question whether or not they are 100% accurate due to scientific fraud or conflict of interest, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why in my, I have a course, How to Read a Insert. And it's basically like just if nobody has ever had any exposure to this topic, it is a very hand-holding, step-by-step breaking down every single part of an insert, but also the pharmaceutical and scientific industries as a whole. And it's just very breadcrumb exposing different parts for you to understand. When you read an insert, there's certain context to be aware of. So you brought up the financial conflict of interest. I talk about ASIP. I talk about the financial waiver process. I went into the legislation and showed how someone can easily get a waiver to be on the ASIP and to decide if a product's going to be put on the market. And for those that aren't aware, it's super easy to do. All you have to do is prove that your importance or your necessity to be on that panel is outweighs the potential risk of a potential conflict, financial conflict of interest. And that to me is so subjective. I was an active duty military member for 5 years. I worked at the Pentagon. I worked in intelligence as a budget officer. I used to read contracts and I used to be hounded constantly about financial conflict of interest. And we would have to be so careful about the certain stocks that we were part of, or any, even what people that we had relationships with, we had to disclose, because if they had personal ties to contractors that were petitioning the government, we were beat over the head about that. And so for when I started reading that part of the legislation, that to me was mind-boggling as well. I could not believe that it was that easy to be able to have someone that had pharmaceutical ties or ties to pharmaceutical industries and then be on panels. It was mind-boggling. And what they say, and I know I'm saying that term a lot because it just was, it was so crazy to me that this was all on .gov resources. And then I started researching about the CDC Foundation and how that kind of loophole happens, and how the CDC Foundation can accept funding from Pfizer and from all these pharmaceutical industries, and they take that money and they support the CDC mission, a mission of public health, and they take dollars from pharmaceutical industries and use it to increase vaccine awareness and acceptance. And yet, to me, how is that not a conflict of interest? And to see that a lot of the CDC Foundation, there was something, I can't remember what they called it, but it was basically to certify that they were good stewards of the money that they had been given. And so then I went to the documentation that supported that certification, and that certification, in their documentation, they said that there just needed to be a policy. They didn't have to read the policy. They didn't have to verify that the policy was enforced. They just had to have some kind of policy on file. And to me, that was crazy. I could not believe it. So when I do read inserts, there are certain sections that I take with a grain of salt, especially the clinical trial data. I flesh out the clinical trial, like how that data happens, how that section gets populated in an insert. And when I first started researching, I just scrolled right past it. I didn't even take any time. I didn't waste my time reading it, because to me, it was very subjective, and it could be very I have a business background. You can manipulate that data as much as you want. And then, they have the difference between absolute risk and relative risk. And you have the several of the, actually almost all of the studies don't have a placebo, don't have a saline injection as the placebo. They have another vaccine, or the placebo is the same vaccine just administered a week or 2 weeks or a month later. So what we think we know about these products and the process in which they have been brought to market is not accurate. And it's easily contradicted if you just go and look at the actual insert, and then you look at, that's why I stick with .gov stuff. If you just go and you even look what they say, it's easily contradicted and it's easily invalidated.
Right. Yeah. So on that note, as many of our listeners know, much of the time we can reach any conclusion we want scientifically, if we formulate the hypothesis and the study in such a way that we coerce the outcome to be what it is that we're looking for, right? To be profitable, really, for the pharmaceutical industry, which is really what it comes down to. So, one of the more controversial statements that has ever come out of the CDC and various so-called experts is always this mantra that vaccines do not cause autism. So, I would love to hear your thoughts on that based on the inserts.
So I remember when I first started researching it, and I was still very skeptical because my mom had come at me with so hard and so fast that I just, put up barriers. And then I remember coming across Andy Wakefield, which I think you interviewed. I had
Yes.
seen that you had interviewed him, and I started reading his critiques, because I always like to take the devil advocate position in mind. I always like to read the devil advocate position. And I remember reading through some of the blog posts about him, and it just wasn't adding up. It just wasn't adding up. And so I think on one of his websites, one of the movie, I think it was the 1986 movie that came out, or documentary that came out, he had on his webpage his side of the story. And it was very logical. It was very level headed. As I was reading through it, he cited everything, he explained everything that happened. And to me, it was just made sense. And now that we have so much research that talks about the gut brain axis and all these other things that support what he was originally saying, and he wasn't even saying it definitively, he was just saying there needs to be more research. And for him to be so villainized with him just saying that, to me, was a red flag that there was a lot more going on that needed to be researched. And I was actually, I was able to meet him in person back in 2020. I think it was mid 2020. He did a screening of 1986, and I was able to meet him. And he is such a humble individual. He is just so kind and so humble. And to see how he is been treated is quite disgusting, honestly. And I really hope that one day he gets vindicated, and I really hope that one day, I think that's more and more as people start researching, they start realizing the attacks that have been on him. But so when I started researching it, that was kind of my personal research, but I didn't really touch it from just the inserts perspective, because every single .gov resource said there is no link to autism. It was a absolute, there's no intellectual curiosity of there being a potential link, even though autism rates are increasing. And as RK Jr. continues to state about the 1 in 35 and how it was when he was a kid, and I think it was like 1 in 100 or something like that, or 1,000. But I didn't want to touch it because I couldn't provide the .gov resources. However, I just published my first book, and in that section, I had gotten a lot of questions about what is it, thimerosal, the mercury. Yeah, I had gotten a lot of questions about it, so I decided to flesh that out because I wanted to be able to answer the questions that I had received. And as I was researching, there were conflicting research studies, and you can really find one study to support yes, it does cause, and another support study to support the opposite. So as I was starting to research it, there was one point that I came across that said that the vaccines that have thimerosal in it have decreased, but the rates of autism have increased. And that was an interesting correlation to me. So then I started researching, okay, well, what else is used as an adjuvant? And then I came across aluminum. And so I started researching more on aluminum. And then I realized, oh my gosh, there's so many .gov resources that talk about aluminum being neurotoxic, contributing to Alzheimer's, contributing to a whole bunch of neuro issues, that I started thinking, okay, well, what products have aluminum in it? And so many of the vaccines on this schedule have aluminum in it. You can quickly look this up on the, Vaccine Safety, Institute of Vaccine Safety, their excipient table. They have, if you type in aluminum, it'll pop up all of the vaccines. And then, of course, if you go into each individual insert, it'll say it in the description section, which is typically section 10. But so then as I was researching this, I also came across an NIH webpage that said that there is absolutely no link to autism and vaccines for mercury-containing vaccines. And then further down in the webpage, it said, however, there could be a link to environmental toxins of a pregnant woman. And so it was saying if a pregnant woman was exposed to environmental toxins when the baby was in utero, there could be some kind of a link to autism. Well, the Tdap, both US licensed vaccines on the market right now for Tdap have high levels of aluminum. So looking at that, just taking the .gov stuff, we're not even talking about conspiracy. We're not talking about funded studies, just taking what the NIH says and taking what we know is in these vaccines. There's a correlation there. Not saying causation, but there's a correlation there and it needs to be researched. Right. And honestly, in my opinion, I believe those products should be pulled from the market until there is further safety studies done.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So you've done a lot of research, obviously, into what are in the vaccine inserts, but you didn't stop there. So what are some of the other medications that you've looked at, and what are some of the findings that you've found particularly interesting?
Oh man, we could be here for days. I've covered prescriptions from Viagra to Ozempic to Zoloft to Adderall to over-the-counters such as Miralax, acetaminophen. I've covered a whole bunch. I have over 50 pharmaceutical deep dives on my website, and I'm not stopping. I'm actually getting ready to do a website refresh. I hired 2 amazing website designers and engineers, and they are currently refreshing all of that just to make it easier to search on my website. But whatever you want to cover, we can go in depth because I most likely have covered it.
Okay, so let's talk about Adderall, since a lot of the patients that I see, for example, are prescribed Adderall. I'm not saying that all of the parents are utilizing Adderall. However, many of these kids do have ADHD presentations, and so they are prescribed Adderall very often. Um, so I'm interested to hear what the insert says.
Yeah, it's actually quite shocking. And I did add a section in my book. For as an example of the deep dives that I do. I didn't put all of my deep dives in the book because it would have rivaled the length of an encyclopedia. But I did provide an example, and the example that I picked was Adderall, and then I talked about ADHD at the after that. So the biggest thing for Adderall, especially for adults, is sudden death. That's listed as a potential adverse reaction. So to me, that's full stop. That should be pulled
Right.
to research it more. But there's other things like depression and for children, slowing of growth, heightened weight. It was interesting. I read that on the Adderall insert, and I've had several people in my own personal life. One example is we have this guy that's a part of our Bible study group, and he is shorter than his siblings. And other people in his family are taller. And then it came out just through talking with him that he had been put on Adderall at a very young age. He had been on it for over a decade. And here it is, you look at the insert and it says that slowing of growth for height and weight is known to be a potential adverse reaction to Adderall. And it was crazy that I had read that and then hearing conversation with him and realizing, I know why you're short. It's because you were on Adderall for all of those years. So there's the other thing to be aware of too is many of the Adderall medications or ADHD medications also have synthetic artificial dyes. And I have been really hounding on artificial dyes lately. There is a new documentary coming out called To Die For, the documentary. The founders, the filmmakers for that are amazing. They are so passionate. They have interviewed some incredible scientists about the concerns of artificial dyes. And there are many artificial dyes that can lead to hyperactivity and lead to making your ADHD symptoms worse. And unfortunately, a lot of these ADHD medications have artificial dyes in them, which can make your ADHD symptoms, according to lots of research, worse. So that's another thing to be looking at. If you do accept a product, to see how the ingredients can play into some of the adverse reactions that you're dealing with. And if you do feel that Adderall is part of your health protocol and something that you want to keep in your lifestyle, maybe look at finding a compounding pharmacist to remove those artificial dyes. Most of the dyes are added because of the different dosage levels. So it's a way for the pharmacist to distinguish between one dosage between another, but there's other ways to do that. And if you go to a compounding pharmacist, most of the time they can provide your dosage without the artificial dyes.
That's really interesting. So the dyes are really only there for convenience for the pharmacist.
Correct. Yes.
Wow. Wow, so interesting. Okay. Um, I'm interested to ask about Miralax. I don't know if you have that pulled up, but I would love to hear a little bit more about that because as many of our listeners know, lots of my patients have issues with constipation, whether they have autism or any kind of chronic illness. Constipation is always an issue, and Miralax is typically the intervention most commonly prescribed. And I'm aware of several issues with Miralax only because of class action lawsuits, actually. So I am interested to know what the inserts actually say.
Well, the first most blaring thing that popped out to me when I was reading about Miralax is that it's prescribed off label for children. And most parents don't know that. According to, well, so also Miralax is an over the counter. So it doesn't
Mhm.
have a insert that you would see for Adderall. But it
Right.
does Daily Med, NIH's Daily Med database does have insert like information for Miralax.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, it's just a photocopy of the insert and it's really hard to read. So I tried my best to make it as readable as possible as I was doing that post. But one of the things that really stood out to me is it said, Miralax has not been safety studied, or the effectiveness of Miralax has not been studied for children under the age of 18. So that's one thing to be aware of, is that when you're reading all of this, there's no data on, at least according to the manufacturer, for using for a
Right.
child, which to me was crazy. Because when I did when I did my Miralax post, I don't know how many people messaged me and said, oh my gosh, my pediatrician has prescribed Miralax for my child daily for years, and yet
Yep.
they don't have any informed consent. They don't have any awareness of what could potentially happen.
Right.
I'm going to pause real quick and I'll pull it up real quick to see what's on
Sure.
there.
One of the things that I've looked at previously, and correct me if I'm wrong because I can be wrong, of course, is that it does contain propylene glycol. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that. Is that correct?
That is, yes. It's propylene or polyethylene glycol,
Okay.
3350, 17 grams of that. And I think that's used in antifreeze. It's derived from petroleum,
Right.
and there's a host of other issues that can go along with if you're speaking it in terms of using it long term.
Right.
There, according to the insert, I'm reading it right now: blood and stool, severe bloody diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, rumbling noise produced by the movement of gas through the intestines, anus inflammation and soreness, allergic reaction, hives, excessive stool frequency, rectal bleeding, increased sweating. So these are all things that, to me, when I read that, it's your body communicating to you that there's a foreign substance in the body and it's rejecting it. When
Right.
I read that, that's what I read. Now, there are situations where I understand why somebody would want to pursue this. And being pro informed consent, I don't want to make a decision for you. I just want to make sure that you know the known adverse reactions that a manufacturer has listed. So, one, you can be observant, and then two, you can expedite treatment should any of these adverse reactions come up, especially a lot of these can cause dehydration. And if you're dealing with chronic illness, that's not a good thing to
Right. Right.
add to the table.
Yeah. So um I've heard you speak before about the way in which things are presumptively prescribed. And so I wanted to speak to that because I know that a lot of parents listening have given their kids things like Miralax or Adderall because they are fearful either of disappointing their doctor or what they think the ill effects of not taking the medication might be. So, talk to me a little bit about presumptive prescribing and how that plays into kind of the fear, really, the fear mongering that goes on in so many doctors' offices around the country.
That's a great question. And I think it's really important to hit on. So the CDC has done studies, and also the American Academy of Pediatrics has done studies about the effectiveness of using a presumptive delivery strategy. So that is when a pediatrician walks into the office, or a nurse walks into the office and says, "These are the products that your child's getting today," instead of, "Have you thought of this?" or "This is the diagnosis that I have come to based on observations that you provided me, and then observations of your child and any diagnostics tests that we've done. And then what do you think of that? Or do you agree with this diagnosis based on your personal experience with your child? Because you know your child better than I do." There's no give and take. It's that kind of strategy assumes that the authority lies with the medical provider, and that's not true. If you were responsible for a potential adverse reaction to any and all medical products, you automatically have the authority to accept, delay, or decline that product. So when you're going into that kind of environment, right off the bat, if that happens to you, no is a full sentence. You don't have to feel like you have to explain yourself, or try to prove them wrong, or try to educate them. That's not your job. It's important to understand that healthcare is a service, and if they are no longer serving you, you have the right to go somewhere else, and you have the right to safely remove yourself from that situation. And maybe it was just you got on the wrong foot off the rough, or got on the wrong foot, and it was just heated conversation, and you want to take a break and maybe follow up appointment. That's fine. You can always do that. Or maybe when you get home and you realize, you know what, that was actually medical coercion, that was medical bullying, I'm going to find someone else. That's totally fine too. There are plenty of pediatrician's appointments where I have been medically bullied. I've safely removed myself from this situation. I've scheduled a follow-up appointment because it would have been too hostile for me not to. And then when I got in my car, or a few days later, I called and canceled it. That's okay.
Mhm.
You can
Mhm.
do that. Don't feel like you have to go to that follow-up appointment. You can cancel it. It's just make sure you do it outside the window of getting charged. Um,
Yeah.
but to me, it's really important to understand that many of the times when you do walk into a medical provider's office, they're not really seeing you. They're seeing a number. They're seeing billable hours, and when you go against what they expect, there might be an emotional knee jerk reaction. And just understand that that's not towards you. It's not you, it's them. And for you to realize that, and not take that on. I know as moms, we can feel that way, and we can have that consumer guilt of, we don't want to inconvenience anyone. We don't want to be the salmon, swimming against the stream. We don't want to be rebellious. We don't want to be tagged as that parent. But it's important for you to realize the structure and the kind of sales funnel that you're walking in, and that it's okay to remove yourself from that situation.
It's funny because I think if people were, for example, in a timeshare meeting, things would turn out much differently. Like, you feel empowered to say no in many of those scenarios versus when you walk into a pediatrician's office. And I think a lot of it has to do with this whole idea of like, the clinician being a person in authority. Um, I've worked a lot with so many parents in empowering them to really make decisions that are best for their own child. Sometimes that means going against what I recommend, and that's okay, because ultimately it's their child, and they do know their child better than anybody else. I see them, even though my appointments are significantly longer than a traditional practitioner. Um, I still don't know everything there is to know about that child. And so, I always say to parents, if something is working and you feel like it's helping your child, by all means, continue doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You're not beholden to me. There's no responsibility to me. And in fact, I would encourage you to ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
because to me, that's far more important, is making sure that that child is getting the care that they need and the care that's truly suited best for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so how many people would you guess are actually getting true informed consent across the country?
In conventional healthcare,
Yeah.
0%.
Yeah.
If they are, it is probably very, very small in conventional
Hmm.
healthcare. And it's because it's not structured that way.
Hmm.
The average doctor's appointment is 15 minutes, and it's even less for that for pediatricians visits. There is no way for a patient to fully understand all of the risks, benefits, ingredients, contraindications, drug interactions, clinical trial data, post-marketing adverse reaction data. There's no way that you could cover all of that in that short amount of time and discuss other things like for a well baby visit, discuss milestones, speech delays, growth inhibitors, all these other things that you're being assessed for during those office visits. It's impossible. And so I know for a fact that it's not. And I also know because hundreds, if not thousands, of medical providers have messaged me saying there is just not enough time to fully assess every single patient and their awareness level of informed consent of their own bodies. If you
Hmm.
discuss, for example, if you discuss Miralax, if you talk with a parent about Miralax and you start discussing about the different effects that it might have on the body, and they don't even understand the bodily systems, they're not going to understand the potential adverse reactions that could happen. So I understand it from the medical professional view as well, that the system is just not set up right.
Right.
It's got to have a complete overhaul for informed consent to actually be happening. And so that's why I encourage people to utilize your doctor to be that healthcare service of helping you with the diagnosis and then helping you with recommended treatments. But you're the ultimate authority to make that final decision on if you accept the recommended treatment plan, or maybe you don't even agree with their diagnosis. Maybe they're not listening to everything that you say, and so maybe you go with someone else, or maybe you'll get other diagnostic tests to help you with your diagnosis, or there's so many other different things that you can do as the patient that you have power to do. So that's why I suggest read the inserts yourself, because it's not going to happen when you're sitting in that doctor's appointment. And for those the very, very small amount of people that do tell me in the conventional healthcare setting, they do tell me that their OBs sit down with them and answer all their questions and don't rush them out the door. They are so blessed. They're so lucky. They don't know how lucky they are, because that is not the norm.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that, pharmaceutical prescribing is incentivized, right? So we're talking about a doctor who has a limited toolkit for one thing, right? They're designed primarily and educated on pharmacology and in some cases surgical interventions, right? So those are the two main toolkits that they have to choose from. And then they're incentivized to choose from those toolkits as well. You don't get a kickback from prescribing magnesium for constipation, for example. So, the whole entire system is in desperate need of a huge overhaul. And I think that that's really what it comes down to is, regardless of what's going on, fraudulently or perhaps, legitimately in the in the scientific world, um, it's funded by the very people that are then, educating our medical profession and then incentivizing them to prescribe those particular products. Um, yeah. Any words on how we might change that?
So I spoke earlier, I was able to go to the Senate roundtable discussion with Senator Ron Johnson and RFK Jr. and a host of whole bunch of other doctors and just people that are passionate about informed consent for food and for pharma. And at the very end, the closing remarks of RFK Jr., he spoke to the entrepreneurship of Americans and how there are so many healthcare services out there outside of conventional healthcare outside of the insurance networks. And I see it flourishing. I haven't gone to a insurance network provider in 5 years. I go outside of that, and I have an amazing healthcare team. We purposefully budget to make sure that we are able to access that, and we don't go on vacations. We don't go out to eat. We are a one income family, but we make sure that we see a chiropractor every week because it's important for me and my kids, and I can see a difference in my life and then their lives when they don't get adjusted frequently. We have a naturopathic doctor that we also frequently see. My son and daughter had impetigo last year, and we saw our medical doctor and we saw our naturopathic doctor, but the medical doctor wasn't in our insurance because she refuses to administer vaccines. So we had, debate her. It's expensive. It can be expensive, but there are so many other options out there. And that's why I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but I'm working on a pro-informed consent provider directory to connect patients and parents together with providers in their area, either in their area or through telehealth, because that is something that I do see. So many options are coming out now, and more people are starting to realize that the current system is so broken. And I spoke to the need of an overhaul, but I don't even know if it can be saved in its current state. I kind of think it needs to crumble all the way to the ground, and then maybe
burn it down,
burn it all down, and then build it up after. I don't know how. Maybe other people have other ways that they can. I know Callie Means talks about taking away the incentive programs, and maybe that'll help. But to me, I see that the current solution is to go to all these other healthcare providers that truly value informed consent, truly understand our bodies as a whole and not just a siloed part or specialized part of the body. They're looking at the root causes, and they're looking at true health and not symptom management. So I think that, to me, is probably, me personally, is the answer, is to go that route.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, cutting from the consumer end, right, will indefinitely, you know, bring about change throughout the medical community, but certainly, I think if we also cut the funding from the federal end,
Yeah.
that would also,
what is it, flank from both sides?
yeah. So maybe that's the solution. I don't know. But it will force, medical providers to really start doing the research outside of, what the pharma reps are telling them, in their 10-minute meetings or on their week-long Hawaii vacations.
That to me was another thing. When I first started sharing, I had pharmaceutical reps, and then I had people like front office managers messaging me, telling me about some of the extravagant, lunches that they get to go on and how the gifts that they get. And I'm just like, how is this legal? This is crazy to me.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that. So maybe we can just touch on that real briefly. But, I think ultimately pharmaceutical reps are walking into these doctors' offices with one goal in mind, and that is to increase sales. And they walk in with the newest, latest, and greatest drug that probably has gone through perhaps one clinical trial. It might still be in clinical trials, and we don't have the full results yet. They go in and speak to that doctor and give them essentially the Cliff Notes version of what this drug is going to do for their patients and how great it is and how wonderful it is. Very rarely do they talk about, extreme side effects or the things that they're seeing in clinical trials that might be of concern. And then they're also incentivizing them beyond just prescriptions, right? Because they're offering to take them on, they go on a 7-day trip to Hawaii. They talk for an hour, in a meeting. And about the drugs, and then they take their family members on a very extravagant type vacation, right?
Have you seen oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no,
Have you
please.
seen Pain Hustlers with Emily Blunt and Chris Evans?
Yeah.
That entire movie just completely validated everything that any ex-pharmaceutical rep has messaged me on. And it was crazy how accurate the stories of what they had told me. And I have a lot of ex-pharmaceutical employees that have messaged me during the COVID craziness. I had this one in particular that would send me inner office emails and kind of say like, hey, this is what's getting ready to come around the corner. And so I would quickly research it and be able to have a post ready for whenever they announce something. But when I was watching that movie, it was absolutely bonkers to me how accurate it was. And then also at the very end, because they kept saying about the safety study, I can't remember exactly what it was in the movie, of how it was some pain relief for, I believe, cancer patients or something like that. And then at the very end, they talked about the study that they had quoted the entire movie and how it was actually completely rigged. The study was rigged because they asked patients that were basically on their deathbed if they had reduced pain. And of course they were, because it was an opioid. Of course they didn't have pain because they were, drugged up, and then it said that it was non-addictive. And the reason why it was non-addictive is because the patients died.
Right.
And
Right.
so you see that so much in current studies. I was really shocked that they made that movie and how accurate it was.
Yeah, it's amazing. I wonder who funded who
Yeah,
funded
we need to
that.
research that.
Yeah, because and Dr. Andy Wakefield just came out with another film called Protocol 7, which I've covered pretty extensively in the podcast. But for those of you who haven't seen it, I highly recommend it because it does talk about current fraud happening today. The case is still ongoing in the vaccine industry where they are legitimately altering numbers.
I need to
Yeah,
watch that. I haven't watched that yet.
it is absolutely horrendous that this is still allowed to go on. These should be criminal investigations, truly. And I think anybody who watches these things and is not disturbed by them, I mean, I wonder about their sanity, to be
Yeah.
honest. Um, all right, Alexandra. Well, we could probably talk for another hour. Maybe we will, but but I wanted to make sure that we get to these rapid fire questions. So these questions are designed to give our viewers a little bit of insight into who you are, what makes you tick, and what your interests are beyond just the inserts. So, number one, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would that be?
Oh, it's a hard one. There's so many. I've recently been doing every night. It's a elderberry chai medicinal honey in a warm cup of water, and it's delicious.
That
Absolutely
sounds
delicious. So
amazing.
that's probably what I would stick with. And I think most everyone around me right now is sick with something, either walking pneumonia or cold or something like that. And I have not gotten sick yet. So I contributed to that. That's the one I would keep.
Awesome. Tell us something most people don't know about you.
If I could afford it, I would scuba dive every day of my life. I love scuba diving.
Nice. I'm a snorkeler, but I can't equalize my ears, so I have a hard time with
Yeah,
scuba.
I have to yawn or swallow. Mhm.
All right. If I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what would you suggest be added?
Oh, what was I listening to earlier? Hosier's Jackie and Wilson, the chorus, so that always makes me happy. And then Wildflower and Wine by Marcus King, I think is his name. They're not really upbeat songs, but they just always make me happy.
Awesome. What is your favorite guilty pleasure?
The Office reruns. That was
Oh my
peak
gosh.
peak comedy to me.
We could be friends, I think. All right. What is the most influential book you've ever read?
As cliche as it sounds, my entire worldview changed about sacrifice, love, and mercy when I read the Bible.
Awesome. And what does the word revolution mean to you?
Answered prayers.
Oh, I like that. Nobody's ever said that. What does the word remedy mean to you?
Balance, bringing
Mm,
back into balance.
awesome. And lastly, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
Don't gatekeep information. If you learn something, share it with a friend. Boldly and in love, share it with them. I said all the time during the COVID craziness, you are either going to be influenced or you're going to influence others. So this is such an important topic. Influence others.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. It's why I started the podcast 2 years ago and why I'm still talking. I
Love
don't
it.
shut up, maybe. All right, Alexandra, where can people find you?
JustTheInserts.com. And then I'm also on Instagram at JustTheInserts and X is Just the Inserts.
Perfect. And where can they find your book?
JustTheInserts.com. You'll see a big bar that says get my book.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I do hope that we can have many more conversations. I think what you're doing is very important to this world. We need to make sure that we are providing truthful information with a loving hand. And I think you do that very beautifully. So thank you so much for coming on. We'll see y'all next time. Take care.
Thank you.
With hope as a guiding light.